leaving the Four Corners power plant without a supplier of coal. It was at that time the Navajo Nation stepped up. It has been during all of these years that the nation's position has been that at some point in time, if the opportunity should ever arise, we should step in and regain control of our resources in terms of looking what we could do as a nation, rather than just sitting on the sidelines, receiving the taxes and the coal royalties. So as such, the nation took the initiative to become the minor. And becoming the minor, it required an enterprise. No different than Navajo Agricultural Products Industry, Navajo Tribal Utility Authority, Navajo Arts and Crafts, Navajo Engineering. They created an enterprise. And this enterprise is meant to intake. But given that it was brand new, we recognized that it needed to go through its growing pains. It needed to become established. But it was having to get into the stream, from the shore to jump into the stream. And it had challenges. But the Navajo Nation Council recognized those challenges, and it bestowed upon NTEC the authorities necessary to move in the direction of being a minor. We depended, and as such, realizing the challenges and moving towards the initiative of becoming minor, the nation wanted to be assured that this is something that we wanted to get into. As a result, the Navajo Nation decided that we need to do due diligence. We want to know anything and everything about getting into this business. And it's by virtue of that due diligence that the nation spent dollars so that we would know what we were getting into. The nation hired a due diligence team that was they were experts in the mining industry. And they set out and spent time, not only with the employees, but looking at the corporation, looking at everything that had to do with the possibility of the nation undertaking this major initiative. It was at the end of the day, they came back and presented that due diligence to the Navajo Nation Council. And basically, it was, you should consider this seriously. You should consider it seriously because, one, you have 100 years of resources sitting there. When you look at the investment that they're asking for in comparison to, in the event you had to start over, you need to get into it. But it was also at that same time that coal began to lose favor in the eyes of the general public. And it was facing a tough, and even as we speak today, facing a tough environment. So as a result of the due diligence, the Navajo Nation created NTEC. Within the creation of NTEC, it granted the authorities necessary to move forward on this major initiative. No different than, again, NAPI, NTOA, NECA. He said, you are now an enterprise of Navajo Nation. You go forth and you do what needs to be done passage of the legislation, then Navajo became a major player in the energy field. An example of that becoming a player was when the Arizona Commission Corporation decided to deal with deregulation, where that initiative was basically to deregulate. So and what that meant was any company that felt like they were able to generate electricity and sell it on the open market, you could do it. And recognizing folks that were within the industry realized that maybe this was not a good idea, and because it would also have a ripple effect onto what the Four Corners Power Plant as well as the mine. The Navajo Nation stepped in and took the initiative to advocate against deregulation. We had a major influence through the voice of intake. And so, as time went on, the deregulation initiative, they withdrew it, and it's no longer in place. If the nation was not part of the energy, a player in the energy field, who's to say that today it would went the other way? But that's the type of influence that we are, that's the arena that we are in today and moving forward. So that's one example. But nonetheless, we are here today. And why are we here today? Going back to the authorities that were granted. There were certain things that needed to happen to finalize becoming the owner. You had the Navajo Nation, the parent company, creation of NTEC. And these requirements included, one, to finalize the coal agreement. In turn, that coal agreement would be signed by the owners of Four Corners Power Plant prior to 2016, so 2016 it would continue to operate. But also was the insurance requirements in terms of reclamation. Mind you, reclamation is a day-to-day operation. As explained to me, it's ongoing, and it was required by BHP. And each time in this case, NTEC going forward, as they moved out of, in this case we're in Area 4, when Area 4 is exhausted, reclamation starts. And so it's ongoing. Everything prior to Area 4, the dollars have been put in place. But in order to do that, it had to create an insurance, a bonding company to do that. And so that's the purpose of this legislation. It would be required by any other ABC company, XYZ company that came in. However, somewhere along the line, the insurance company decided that, well, let me step back. It was agreed upon, going through this process, that the Navajo Nation Arbitration Act would be used to settle any disputes that came about. Somewhere along the line, the outside party decided we want, because you're a new company, we want to have the parent, which is the Navajo Nation, also sign off on this. It's no different than you as parents who have had to co-sign for your kids in one way or another because you're the parent. In this situation, Navajo Nation is being asked Nation Arbitration Act, or in this case, the state's arbitration. The processes are the same. The same rules apply. You get to select, each party gets to select an individual, and they in turn select a third party, and then they hear the arguments. So the rules are the same in either case. In this case, they're asking to go not Navajo, but out. It does get complicated, and it may sound like we're giving up, but in essence, the players are the same. The players are not the same. They are the same in terms of who is selected and the process in moving forward. And so that's what the purpose of this legislation is. How important is this legislation? It's very important in moving forward. Without the reclamation in place, then there's actually really no need to move forward. It does have a ripple effect, not just on the nation, but all the way down. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I will turn it over to Mr. Stretcher to talk about the bond and how they deal with it and how it's associated with the legislation to further clarify the need for this. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sosi would also like to talk prior to your permission, sir. Okay. Mr. Agee.
Good morning, delegates. In this work session, one of the things we're trying to do is clear up the purpose of the legislation and exactly why we need this particular legislation to be approved by the Navajo Nation Council. So in a roundabout way, we'll try to establish some background, as you heard from Mr. Bates. In addition to that, we need to understand the context, the environment that we're in, so that we fully understand why these instruments or bonds are needed. And that's what the whole purpose of this is, so everyone understands and is educated. And you make an informed decision on this particular action. And we want to make sure that you fully understand the scenario, the effect, and the consequences that this action may result in. And that's the purpose of this particular session here. First of all, the one thing I want to remind everybody is that, as Mr. Bates said, about a little over a year ago, not this past July, but the July before that, of 2012, the Navajo Nation became aware that the power plant owners and the mine company, BHP Billiton, could not reach agreement on what the price of coal would be going into the future. And one of the things that that signals to us is if you don't have an agreement on a fuel supply for the power plant cannot operate. And we all know by recent actions that the lease for the power plant expires or comes to its initial term, the end of its initial term in 2016. And that being the case, there was, it created a situation where the Navajo Nation had to decide for itself, can we live with these businesses shutting down? And we looked at our options to see what we could do and not do. And I'm a person that draws things out and paints a picture for you, to help you understand. So I think they're putting up the whiteboard for me, and I can draw this scenario out for you. The one thing I want to reiterate what's important to this is the fragile economy of the Navajo Nation. We have, as you all know, a high unemployment rate on the Navajo Nation. Over 50% is the figures that I've seen. And a lot of people do work here in Window Rock. There are ongoing concerns at the mines. There are some jobs at the power plants and so forth. But what we're actually doing here today is, in essence, preserving an economy that exists on the Navajo Nation. A lot of people say, well, we raise cattle, we raise sheep, and so forth. But one of the things I know, having worked for NAPI as its legal counsel, is that you only get crops once a year. You only get cattle and sheep once a year most of the time. And so it's usually during the spring, and when you fatten them up, you sell them. But with this particular industry, with this particular economy, the coal is generally extracted. Every day, people get paid. It's burned every day to generate electricity. And the byproduct, which is electricity, is the product that we produce and sell to the outsiders. So this particular activity generates an income 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's one of the few industries that exists on the Navajo Nation that generates that kind of an income. 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. It generates a product that's sold into the marketplace, and we receive returns from it. And that's very key for us to understand. We have grocery stores and we have other things, but not too many economic ventures on the Navajo Nation produce the kinds of income or revenue to the Navajo Nation and some of our employees out there as this industry makes. So it's a very key, and I want to. That's one of the things that I want everyone to recognize. Next is this idea that, as Mr. Bates explained, we're undertaking a business activity. We're going into a business venture, creating a business entity, acquiring a mine that will supply fuel to another business entity. In the United States, when you go to school, law school, like I did, and some of the folks here did, there are certain areas that you study. Theories of law that are so general in the United States. One of them is something called contract law. And the concept in the United States is people have no obligation or duties to one another as a general matter of law. And you create a duty to each other by the use of something called the law of contracts. And there are legal elements that need to be fulfilled in order to have a valid and binding contract. And then when you have a dispute, there's also defenses that you can raise and so forth. So keep this in mind. That's the arena that we're stepping into, the Navajo Nation, into this arena where businesses operate by entering into these contracts and create legal obligations to one another. So that's what this particular issue is. And And that's why in this particular deal, we've dealt with BHP that acquired a mine. Now we're getting to the point of having to sell the coal to the power plant owners. And there's another regulator out there called the United States government, OSM. And in order for the Navajo Nation to own this mine, there are certain legal requirements that the various parties have. OSM, the federal government, says there are certain requirements that Intech needs in order to own this mine by statute, legally. One of the requirements is that they need a performance bond to satisfy OSM's requirements. On the other hand, the power plant owners are saying, look, this is a new business you're getting into, and we don't know whether or not you can perform. So we want a performance bond from you to ensure that you can live up to your contract obligations. So that's the issue here in this discussion, is a requirement, a federal government requirement of owning a mine, and a requirement by the power plant owners that they want to make sure that Intech and the Navajo Nation can perform on the contract, the fuel supply agreement that we're entering into with them, so that they don't have to shut down, or if there's interruptions and so forth, I guarantee that the contract will be fulfilled. And over here, reclamation, or OSM, the reclamation bond, would say that once the mining is done, that the land is brought back to its original condition as you found it before you mined it. And that's what the reclamation bond is about. And these are requirements not of BHP, but the requirements of the federal government, OSM, and the requirement that the power plant owners would like us to procure is some sort of a guarantee that we will be able to do the reclamation that we agreed to and be able to supply the coal to the power plant owners. And so this is the discussion, and this is where we're at. So when that was requested of us, we went to the insurance companies that we have, which is the representatives here, Marsh. They work for us. When we need insurance, we go to our insurance companies and say, this has been requested of us. Whether it's NTUA, whether it's NECA, whether it's the Navajo Nation itself, if we need insurance, we go to the folks that we work with to say, we need some kind of a bond or we need insurance. And that's why they're here to explain to us the situation that we're in and the sort of activities that they engage in to be able